I'm Coach Tarek.
And I'm Vanessa.
We are your movement experts, and we are here to educate health and fitness professionals with the tools to create real change for and within the industry.
Hello, and welcome back to Purpose-Driven Movement. My name is Vanessa. I am your host for today. I would like to introduce you to our guest, Andy Bryant. If you haven't heard of Andy, he is what we would call a functional foot podiatrist. What on earth does that mean? Andy is all about taking your foot out of restrictive shoes and getting them to move freely, potentially using barefoot or wide toe box shoes, and changing the way that your body functions, the way that it functions through pain, the way that it functions through movement, by beginning with your feet. It's a pretty practical and interesting theory because everything starts with our foot. We hit the ground with it first. And there are still so many skeptics, but also naysayers about barefoot. Andy's going to bring a whole bunch of research and a really, really cool and fascinating talk today about what it means to be barefoot, to go barefoot, and to utilize this type of training. Can't wait for you to listen.
Check out FTI's latest offer, which is 15% off of any of our online courses. Simply go to www.functionaltraininginstitute.com and input PDM15 at cart checkout.
And with me, I have Andrew Bryant. He is an incredible podiatrist. I've been following you for a number of years, I think now, on Instagram. Welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Vanessa.
Pleasure. I have so many questions. I'm going to start from something that I saw on one of your posts on your Instagram. What is a natural foot versus a normal foot?
So I do a lot of work for the Foot Collective, and they have a program called Restore to Explore, with this idea that your feet shouldn't be limiting you from doing what you're doing. Like you shouldn't have to think, oh, I can't go on that hike, or I can't squat, or I can't play basketball because of my feet. And so if your feet are functioning well, they shouldn't be the limiting factor in stopping you doing something. So I think that is what I would call a natural foot, a foot that just can do whatever your brain wants it to do, like in terms of physical human movement. And then obviously with limitations, because then I think of someone like doing parkour, and that's like, well, maybe your foot could do it, but maybe the rest of your body couldn't. But then also like actually fundamentally the way the foot is shaped, I think it's probably referring to that. Most human feet these days are widest at the base of the toes, and the foot is designed or evolved to be widest at the tips of the toes. So that is a normal or regular foot compared to a natural foot. That would be the most obvious thing that I'd be referring to then. A natural foot should be able to pronate and supinate, not evenly, just as the body and the ground requires it to do that. And you should have a decent amount of balance through your foot, a good ankle range of motion. There's a few fundamentals, big toe joint range of motion, things like that. That would be a natural foot. Whereas feet that wear conventional shoes find it harder to get out of pronatory moment. They might have stiff, big toes. They've got, like I said before, toes squished together, ankle joint range of motion issues. That would be what we might call a normal foot these days.
Yeah. I mean, if you're interested, there are some great pictures on your Instagram that kind of show what you're talking about. And I love, it's such a small distinction when you talk about the base of the toes versus the top of the toes, right? And I think one of the best quotes that I've heard from some of the movement specialists that I've worked with is that, millimeters of movement at your feet create centimeters of space further up the chain. And what's your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, for sure. Especially when it comes to the big toe. Like the non-negotiable for me when it comes to footwear is allowing the big toe to be straight. And when I say straight, I'm talking about if we took a line down the first metatarsal, the big toe should extend directly from there and be able to work in that realm. And so nearly all conventional shoes push it sideways, which means you are missing out on unlocking a whole lot of range of motion at that joint and then within the whole body. We're designed to push off through that big toe. And so that is definitely a big deal. This idea that we're meant to be able to splay our toes within our shoes is important for sure, but it's not that they should be splayed all the time. They should be able to splay and contract and move like our hand can. And so most shoes don't let them splay. And so then I think there's a hyper focus on them being able to splay, but they shouldn't stay splayed. They should be able to move. When our foot's landing and adapting to the ground, it's splayed. And as we push off, it contracts and the toes come together.
So I love that as well, because you'll see a lot of people in kind of the opposite side of it, always wearing their toe spacers or trying to turn their feet into big paddles. What's your take on some of these apparatus and these tools that people are using?
Yeah, so toe spaces are a really interesting one. I find that they're like a little gateway drug into realizing your natural foot shape and function. So I think they're really helpful. And if you're not going to change your shoes, they're even more helpful for sitting around in, when you're not in conventional shoes. But like I said, there are some different types of toe spaces, some that are one size fits all and really push out on that splay. I think that's got a really good effect to stretch your feet out when they've been compressed possibly for years. But I don't think they're very functional. I don't think our foot should be splayed out like that for nearly all activities. Like when you see someone squatting, like your toes shouldn't be pressed at their limit like that, because that means the little muscles that are attached to their toes on full extension and can't contract as they should. Really, during a squat, I think our foot should be pronating and spreading, and then as we're pushing up, it should be contracting. And so if we've got them on spread the whole time, that's not ideal. There are other toe spaces that are finer and they almost work like, or the way I see them as working, it's like that tape you might put on the arm, like for a tennis player.
Like physio tape.
Physio tape, exactly. So it's more proprioceptive. The brand that everyone knows is called Correct Toes. They're a lot finer, but there are a few other knockoff brands that do exactly the same thing for a lot less expensive. But they're finer between the toes, so they still let the toes compress and spread, but they just give a little reminder that there should be some movement. And then toe socks are really helpful for that as well. I think if you start wearing toe socks, you'll never go back because they create this little space, but still let your foot be able to move, whereas some of those other toe spaces are a bit too extreme.
This is really cool. I think I'm going to stay on the toe spacer for a little bit, but I'd love to come back to the performance side of it because I think that this is where it gets interesting for why we should be potentially looking at our feet for function. But with toe spacers, I have clients and I've had, many a discussion with people about feet and the way they look and the way that they function. And most of the time, the biggest barrier that I get to people using toe spacers is that, won't that make my feet wide?
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. Yeah, which is always a good answer because that can reframe their idea of having a wide foot or that being a problem. But it's a problem because culturally we're so convinced that our feet should be narrow and there's a look about that as well. So I think, that spaces are going to make your feet wider because that's the way they're meant to be. Our foot is meant to be widest from the tips of the toe, from the tip of the big toe to the tip of the little toe, not at the base of the toes, so that the toes can move because most of the little intrinsic muscles that are in the foot are attached to the toes. A lot of them are attached to the toes. And so if our toes aren't moving, then those muscles aren't doing the job. And a lot of this comes back to that principle of if you load something, well, the principles, the SAID principles, specific adaptation to imposed demand that our whole body is governed by. So if we load a muscle or a joint or a bone, if it's in the correct amount, it will respond by getting stronger. And the reverse is true. If we're not loading our feet, for example, they will respond by getting less strong. And so it's important to be able to move our toes.
I think what you said is so important. And I think as well that keeping your feet in shoes all day that are quite restrictive is its own demand and its own stressor on the foot, right? So, you're constantly having a compression, your toes are being kind of pulled together. That in itself molds your feet to be a certain way. It creates restriction and tension. And then when you want to demand your body to try and do something else, that's where we get that kind of discrepancy, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's like if someone's overweight, they'll tend to have really strong feet because they've got a lot of load on their feet. And so and that load didn't happen immediately. It was built up slowly. And so similarly, our body's so adaptable, it gets used to having a heel so that when you go without a heel, your Achilles complains, even though it might be better for you in the long run, your body's not, has become adapted to this certain way. Or people will say that they need cushioning in a shoe because it's better for that because they've got dodgy knees or something. Whereas if we look at the actual research, cushioning in a shoe unloads the foot, but puts increased load at the knee. So why is it that when they take the cushioning away from the foot, they get a sore knee? Probably because their knee was used to the certain amount of load or the way it was going through that part of the body. And so the change is probably the thing that caused the issue. If the foot can do the shock absorbing and not the cushioning of the shoe, then your knee will be better off for it theoretically as well. Another example is around a big toe joint. When you talk about having a squished shoe and the body getting used to it, there are muscles around the big toe joint, 6 of them to be exact. And so they're meant to be in balance so that your foot can work as a foot's designed to work. But when we squish the big toe sideways, the one on the inside of the foot, it gets weaker, and the one on the inside of the big toe joint gets stronger. And so, if you have surgery, they tighten the one on the inside and loosen the one on the outside of the big toe joint. And so that's your body adapting to its environment. And so when you change back, it's going to arc up a bit, most likely, even though in the long run it might be better.
Yeah. And, part of this kind of question that I like to go down, I was a barefoot transitioner probably about maybe 12 or 13 years ago. I had knee pain, I had sciatic pain from wearing wearing just these shoes. I was standing all day and it just wasn't working. And so, the barefoot craze kind of had just started. The Vibrams had just come out and people started wearing them. And the thing that happened to me when I transitioned was I got a whole bunch of shin pain, which a lot of people complain of. So if someone, is looking, I call it maybe barefoot curious, and they're like, oh, maybe I could explore this area a little bit because I want to increase my health and my performance, what's a really good start? How do we begin this process?
Well, giving yourself a bit of an assessment as to whether you're barefoot at home much, whether you might train at the gym barefoot already, whether you are sensitive to having less on your feet, say when you're on a summer holiday and go to the beach every day. And if those are coming back positive for being pretty good at being barefoot, you probably can get into it pretty easily, especially also if you've got a movement practice lifestyle, like if you're, a yogi or you're at the gym or, if you're conscious of the way your body moves, then these are good signs that easing into a barefoot shoe is probably going to be a smoother transition. You can also look at some of the shoes you already wear. Like you might already be wearing some pretty flat shoes. The only difference is going to be that you're going to create some space, which is the easiest thing to get used to, having the space. Or you might already be in Birkenstocks, which are flat and they're really spacious, but they've got a fair bit of stiffness to them. And so, just finding out where someone is at and then easing them in, because the reverse is someone who's been in orthotics for 20 years and wearing Asics Kayano with their orthotics and gets up in the morning and puts them on and has them on all day. Like that person is going to take a lot longer, and may never get into more like wearing barefoot shoes all the time. They might end up in a shoe that's wide and a bit more flexible without their orthotic, but still has some cushioning. And that's okay. It depends on where people want to go. And clinically, I try and move them to a point where they're going to be more functional and have less pain if they've had an injury. So it's a grey area because you have to assess everyone individually pretty much. That's part of the issue with what happened last time. Born to Run, the book came out and talking about these Mexican guys that could run, this whole tribe that could run forever, were injury-free. They were running on their forefoot without shoes or with very minimal shoes. And so then Vibram Five Fingers came out and were saying some pretty big things about what that meant for runners. Like they could go injury-free, they could do all this type of stuff. And there was a big lawsuit. And in those days, like I was a podiatrist practicing like mainstream then. And I remember runners coming in and saying, I want to try this. And I'd be like, oh, you can't do that. You can't strengthen your muscles in your feet. They're too small. Like if you've been here, it's just going to cause all these things that's still said today. But I think now the barefoot movement has the health and fitness industry behind it and some of the allied health like myself helping people be guided rather than just going all or nothing like you with your shin splints. And so also to not go for a run in them first, like just do day-to-day things or go to the gym, go to a place where you're going to be very mindful of your movement rather than, on that 5K run where you're listening to a podcast or yelling at the dog or something.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's an interesting one. And I think here's a really good place to maybe make the distinction between what's classically called a wide shoe fit and a difference between like a wide toe box. And this one was a revelation for a few of my new clients when they moved across. Could you explain the difference for me?
Yeah, and I'll show just in case we can put these pictures up somehow. I'll just take my shoe off. So a properly wide toe box has space for your big toe to be straight. And really the widest part of the shoe should be at the tips of the toes, not at the base. And so you can, I have people come in and say, oh, I wear 4 triple E or something like that, 4E width shoes. And they'll be super wide at the base, like at the bottom of the toes, but then they still taper. So it's almost like fooling the foot into being able to have all this space and then it pushes the toes back together. So a properly wide toe box allows for the big toe to be straight. Actually, there's like 8 different foot shapes in the forefoot. And so some people have a longer second toe. So we're very lucky. There are now 140 barefoot shoe brands and they have, there'd be 10 that fit the person that have a longer second toe. Some are more square shaped. So their toes sort of go straight across instead of blending down. And so you find your shoe brand and then you can open that up.
Yeah, really cool. So let's then explore this kind of idea that by changing what we do at our feet, it changes our overall health or like wellness and performance further up the chain. What's your kind of research or what's your understanding of that kind of concept?
There are a few caveats to that when it comes to performance. Like if someone's squatting, the Olympics are coming up later this year and all the Olympic lifters will be in Olympic lifting shoes because that is a performance enhancement for the way the body is designed. But if you got all those guys in the gym, they would be able to squat, I would suggest, very well without their shoes on. So they're using it as a performance enhancer. Or similarly, with some of the running shoes these days, the stiff carbon-plated running shoes, they are performance enhancing. They performance enhance for someone that's running a 15-minute park run or a 30-minute park run. There's really good research showing they're helping the slow runners run faster and the fast runners run faster. But I would definitely suggest you don't wear that day to day because it's a shoe that is so stiff, it's doing the job of a foot. So when our foot is running, it should be softening as we land and then then stiffening as we push off. And so the shoe has cushioning to create the softening and then a carbon plate to create the stiffening. And so therefore your foot and some of your calf doesn't have to do so much work, and there's an energy saving in doing that. So it's making you more efficient. So therefore you'll be able to run a bit faster. And so there is definitely some shoes that enhance performance. And I think there's a place for that for sure, as long as the playing field is even. And so then if we look at using our feet to be stronger, so even an example would be a runner that's using that shoe, but if they had weak feet, then it would be less of an advantage. Like to have strong feet as well is helpful. It's like saying with any sport or performance thing, it's like saying we're going to take one part of the body and make sure it's not doing its job properly and see how the rest of the body, like our feet are designed to be part of movement. And so if they can be strong and mobile, then your performance is going to be better. It's just a pretty much a no-brainer. And if you're relying on something to create that support or strength, then your body's not going to do it and miss out because of it. Or, one day you'll be called upon to use that support or strength and not have the shoe or the thing that you think you might need. It's a hard question to answer without going into specifics. And, a specific might be if you don't have good range of motion through your big toe joint, which happens when you use your big toe joint properly as a hinge, then you might be toeing off on the outside. This is called on the outside of your foot through the lesser metatarsals. This is called low gear toe off. So you're not tapping into the power of the medial line of your leg all the way into your pelvic floor. It's a less efficient way to toe off. So you're going to be running and walking less efficiently or doing a lunge less efficiently if you're not using your big toe because you don't have that range of motion there. If you don't have adequate ankle joint range of motion, then your squat is going to be less efficient. You're going to be spending more time on your forefoot in running or walking because you don't have the range of motion in your ankle joint. And so to have the adequate human needs of a foot feeds off into everything else, every other movement really, that is weight bearing especially.
No, that's a great explanation. And I like how you brought up the caveat of the performance enhancing side of it, because it's a question that a lot of people put to you when you start talking about barefoot. Is it like, oh, what about these shoes? And it's like, well, that's a very specific shoe for a very specific purpose. And if you can't run 5Ks, then you don't want to get yourself a pair of those shoes. Like there's no purpose to it.
Yeah, that's right. And they do have their place, but just don't wear them as a day-to-day, because I think that's where the trouble comes with feet. If the regular environment of a foot is not attuned to doing what it's meant to do, then you're going to miss out, basically.
No, that's really cool. I really like that. I really like that explanation. Now, I'm curious because you mentioned that you were kind of like a very traditional podiatrist in terms of your practice a while ago, and then now you've kind of almost transitioned to like really pro barefoot. What created that journey for you?
Yeah, so when I was at uni, and I think I probably went to uni as a podiatrist because I was a runner. I don't know what that link is, but maybe I was just into health science and things like that. But I was running at an elite national level and having shin stress fractures in my tibia and was put in orthotics because we're at podiatry school. That's what we should do because I was overpronating. And I've never, like even this word overpronating, it's not really a thing. It's like saying my arm's overflexing or overextending. Your arm could overextend, but as long as it can flex and extend, the foot should be able to pronate and supinate. And so I was in orthotics for years and I ended up not running and still wearing the orthotics for like another 15 years and just practicing in a very traditional way as a podiatrist. That's using orthotics, not really questioning shoes at all. If anything, when someone like you came to me 13 years ago, I would have told them, I think that movement's like 14 years ago now. I would have told them, no, you can't do that, which is a bit embarrassing now. Anyway, so then I became a cyclist and had a series of head injuries, like in a 2-year space. And so I couldn't ride anymore. And so a mover, I like to be physically active. So I started going to a gym and doing yoga and people were training barefoot at the gym. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then yoga is obviously barefoot. And I noticed my own feet getting stronger. And I thought, like, we'd been taught that you couldn't really strengthen feet. You just didn't do exercise for feet. My business partner was an exercise physiology student before he was a podiatrist. And so it kind of blows me away that he wasn't even saying, hey, we could apply these principles of strength to the foot as well. And so I just started playing around with different ideas. I started trying to barefoot run myself. I just went on a big, down a rabbit hole of research for myself. Like I used 3 different running technique tools to try and learn to run differently. I do every course and just started implementing in my practice and then left the practice that I was a partner in just to work on my own. But really, I'd say yoga was the biggest deal because a good cueing from a yoga teacher, like telling me how to hold my arch up and, just bringing awareness to how my feet should be able to feel, that I could then think, oh, well, if they're doing this, I should be able to do this with my clients. And so I've just done that since. I still prescribe orthotics maybe 1 every 2 months for very, very specific conditions and with exit plans, generally speaking, as in we're going to use this for a period of time with a plan to rehab you out of it?
That was literally my next question.
How might we use orthotics? Yeah, for sure. So there's a few situations I can think of. I've got a child who's about 8 with a genetic hypermobility condition, and her mum has got the same condition, has a really high arch profile, and had been in orthotics for years, but didn't really help her much. And it's good to look at the mum because the daughter's probably going to follow in the same footsteps, literally. And so the daughter's feet are looking pretty good. Not that look matters that much, but when it comes to hypermobility, you are watching and seeing if there's a big change from one side to the other. And then suddenly it's like the hypermobility just took hold of one foot and it just really flattened out and is struggling to get out of that position. I don't mind a foot that pronates. I just want it to be able to get out of that position. And so we've put a very light orthotic in there to help her get out of that position. And we review it every 6 months. She's doing, again, 8-year-olds with exercises. It's a bit shady. So as in, like, it's hard to prescribe exercises. They're going to be for the long haul. So it's all about habitual change. She's already wearing a minimalist shoe, so her big toe is straight. That's one of the best things she can do to get out of pronation, use a straight big toe. And she's doing things like dancing, climbing, being a kid, but we're encouraging exercise that uses her hips to stabilize her feet. Because when her hips are working well, that will hold the arch in this way that's a bit more controlled. So that's like why I'm using it and how she's going to get out of it, I'd suggest. Another one's an old guy that's not motivated at all with tibialis posterior. That's the muscle on the inside of the ankle. Its job is to help you get out of pronation. And the problem is if it starts to get sore and weak, and it's degenerative, so it'll get sorer and weaker, and the arch gets lower, it gets sorer and weaker. And so sometimes you have to put a stopgap in there, especially if they're not doing exercises to help or changing their shoes too much to help. So we use it in that situation. I see a lot of people with orthotics that are trying to get out of them, and so I reduce them so they are a bit more flexible, and I change their shoe, and over a period of 6 months, we wean them out of their orthotic while they're doing their exercise. Often it's more for their brain to get used to going without it rather than their body. Your body will adapt quicker if you've changed the shoe as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it was interesting. I spoke to a couple of clients and mentioned that I was interviewing you, and I asked them, I'm like, what would you want to ask a barefoot podiatrist? And they basically, it was all about orthotics, because many of them, if you're a fitness goer, you've probably been to a podiatrist. They've probably looked at your foot function, and many had been prescribed an orthotic.
Yeah, this is a really interesting thing. Because they're movers in the wrong shoe, they're going to probably get a foot injury. So they end up at a podiatrist. And the podiatrist, and this is what I was taught as well, we will label a foot as like flat or a certain style of foot. And really, these are a measure of the foot doing nothing. So really, the measure should be of the foot moving, because the way someone stands has very little to do with the way it might move. And so then they're labeled with a foot condition, like, because I'll ask my new clients, so what do you think of your feet? Oh, the last podiatrist said I had flat feet. Or the person at the shoe store says I pronate. And I'm like, well, I hope so, because pronation is a normal human movement. Anyway, and so therefore I need these orthotics forever. And so this is that, it's a good business model. You've got something wrong with you and here's something that will fix it forever. Then people just think that they need their orthotic. And really, it's like saying you need your neck brace because you had a sore neck once. Very rarely is it a necessary long-term solution.
Well, one of my clients likened it to, if you notice that your blood pressure or your blood sugar is getting a little bit worse, you could change your diet and, change your lifestyle, and basically you could attune it, or you could just go on drugs for the rest of your life. And sometimes it's unavoidable. And I'm not saying that that's not a thing, but most of the time we can prevent it, or we can alter it with the decisions that we make. And it's the same with the feet, right?
Yeah. And this approach is for people that want to empower themselves. Like my job is to empower people through education so that they can look after themselves and know what to do rather than being reliant upon me. So this model of podiatry or healthcare in itself, because it's not just for feet that this is the model, is for those that want to be empowered, because there's still a subset of the population that still want to be looked after, don't want to have to do any work. I mean, they're the ones that are more likely to get ill as well because they're not already doing the work. And so, a tablet to fix it or a lifestyle change to fix it. This is the choices we have a lot of the time.
You opened up a rabbit hole there for me back when you were talking about your client with hypermobility, because not very many allied health practitioners would mention this as a potential risk factor or a challenge that someone needs to deal with. And I myself fall under what we call the extreme hypermobile category, with every joint in my body being hypermobile. And I think this was part of the reason that kind of led me on this barefoot journey, was after years of ballet, years of gymnastics, my feet are essentially just like ruined. Like my toenails, I had to get them operated on because I got constant ingrown toenails because of the way that like the ballet shoes absolutely ruined my feet. Bunions looked like they were starting to come in my 20s, basically, just because of the way that my feet were shaped. And I just didn't want that to happen. And it just didn't feel right to me. And hypermobility is something that not many people would check for in feet. So what are you looking for when you see something like that? And what are some potential pitfalls?
So I think you'll find, like I notice it from just talking to someone, as in, oh yeah, I have neck pain, or the way they describe their symptoms. And there are obviously some clinical tests we use to see it, but I would hardly ever have to use them. You can usually see it within the foot. And some hypermobility is not genetic. It's more like one might just have a hypermobile shoulders or feet or these types of things. But I think it's far more common than we realize. And it's seen as a positive thing in so many ways. Oh, look, I can do this. And so, but the negative about it is that those small muscles, the joints are obviously looser. And so then the small muscles around the joints in the stability areas, so that's the foot and around the hips and the spine and the shoulders and the neck that are meant to be stable, those small muscles can't control the massive amounts of mobility at the joint. And so then the long muscles have to work hard. So someone will typically always have tight calves, always be tight in the muscles, which doesn't make sense because they're like, I'm really flexible, but I always have tight muscles, tight hamstrings, tight calves, because those long muscles are constantly trying to stabilize the joints instead of the little ones doing the work. And so this is where wearing a barefoot shoe makes a big difference, because we know that wearing a shoe that lets your foot move, those little muscles have to do some work, and in a very graduated way, just wearing the shoe, start getting stronger and supporting the joints in the foot. And then the big long muscles can go back to their job of being explosive and the powerhouses rather than having to be stabilizers. And so I think that is relevant to the other parts of the body as well, like around your neck and spine and hips. But obviously I'm not an expert in that. But when it comes to feet, that family I spoke about with the higher arch profile is unusual. Those with hypermobility are usually they have a lower arch profile and find it harder to get the foot out of pronation into supination, because the thing that triggers that is a straight big toe and all those little muscles in the foot. And so if you've been in a stiff shoe or a shoe that pushes your big toe sideways, which is usually a combination of those two things, then these little muscles haven't have had to do it. So when you walk barefoot, your foot doesn't have the ability to get out of that position. So to train it is super powerful. It makes a huge difference. But in training it with, as you would know, as someone that's hypermobile yourself, it has to be done very gently and very slowly. And you can easily trigger a flare up. And then the best thing to do is not just rest, but to just do a little bit less of what you're doing. And, so it's a whole subset of helping people. But I see a lot of people, because I think traditional podiatry and traditional healthcare doesn't help the hypermobile very well.
No, that's been a different episode and a completely different tangent that I've gone down recently. But I do want to freak out the podiatrist and see how we go, and everyone else, because I'm very flexible, like I said. But there's my big toe.
That is very flexible, yeah. So we have, just for those listening, Vanessa is now putting her big toe almost back on the top of her foot. For normal walking to happen, we need 65 degrees of motion, and you're showing 130 degrees of motion there. I have about 90, but I'd say 8 years ago, before I started this, I would have had 45.
Yeah, it's a lot, right?
Either teaching other people to do mobility work or just wearing barefoot shoes might have got more mobile. But yeah, you've got a lot. That's a dancer's range of motion that you have there.
I like the numbers that you put there, though, because I think that helps, anyone who's kind of a little bit more scientific minded in terms of that toe position. For those listening, I will put that clip up on Instagram so that you can see my weird toes, and then you can measure yourself how far it goes. And here's a better one.
Yeah, and so this is 180 degrees and this is 90 degrees. So this is where I can get my toes to. You need 65 degrees for walking. You need about 45 for running. And Vanessa just did this.
And I just what's that old movie where the girl turns her head all the way around?
Oh, yeah, one of those horror movies. Yeah, that's right.
I can do that with my toe. I digress.
And we don't recommend you try this at home.
No. So I think that it's cool because what we're trying to illustrate here is that what we see as normal, there's a huge range, right, of movement and function that you can gain just from exploring that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Again, in podiatry school, we're taught about something called hallux limitus or hallux rigidus. Rigidus is where the big toe doesn't move at all. Limitus is a limited range of motion. And that was that you don't do anything about it. And so now I have people mobilizing their joints, getting the muscles stronger around the joint. And we see that their range of motion can increase and then they become more functional because of it. So yeah, it's not a write-off.
I've got a couple more questions for you. Let's talk about the Foot Collective because I love what you guys do. Can you describe what it is, how it came about?
Yeah, so Nick St. Louis is a physiotherapist in Canada, and he was, freshly out of school and just seeing this epidemic of foot pain and just thinking there's got to be more to this. And so he started this thing called the Foot Collective in 2015, just an Instagram page really, and just deep diving into natural foot health. And then there was a guy, Jim Dooner, he's a physiotherapist in Brisbane. He founded it around the same time as I did, the Foot Collective, and Nick was coming out here and doing a tour. And he came to the gym that I was working at in like 2018, and Jim was following him around. And so they started working together and coming up with a community. Well, the Foot Collective is more like, it's less specific as in I've got heel pain, here's something to do. It's more like we should all be able to do this as humans, and this is the way to do it. And so there's a big focus on a daily practice, like a 5 to 10 minute daily practice of doing something for your feet. Like you might brush your teeth, you should be doing something for your feet. There's a big focus on habitual change. So sitting on the floor so that your hips can be mobile. So generally less chairs, eating well, sleeping well, wearing minimalist shoes, obviously, or as within reason, a shoe that mimics you being barefoot, and then community. And so this is where they've really pushed into that idea of community. There's an online community where you can do a 42-day trek to base camp, Explorer Trek, where you go through things about pain science, all the different facets of health while you're doing a daily practice for your feet. And, I have a long wait list for new clients. And so I say to people, go and do that and see how you go, because you may not need to come and see me. It's a very cheap membership. There's a community, so they understand that having someone pat you on the back and say, well done, you've got today's work done, is important and helpful. So there's that aspect of them as well. I'm sort of an educator for their Foot Collective professional program, which is any health provider. A health provider is someone that helps their clients get more healthy. And so that could be a Pilates instructor, it can be a masseur, it can be a podiatrist, it could be a general practitioner. Because when it comes to feet, if you understand natural foot function, you could be a masseur without any specific foot training and be better than the podiatrist down the road at getting someone back into a way of living for the rest of their lives that's going to be empowering for their foot health. And so we have a yearly membership fee. You go on the pro registry, so you get referrals of like-minded clients, people that want to do this. That's the key for me. When a client comes through the door, I don't want Joe Blow from 5 doors up coming just because there's a podiatrist on the corner. I want someone that's keen to do the work. And so you get referrals like that. And I provide some education in that platform as well. And they have tools like Soulmate, which is like it's a cork roller, like you can use as a roller, but you can also do some balance stuff on it, like a balance beam. You can do a whole lot of exercises. So you get them at cheaper price as well. This sounds like a Foot Collective plug. And I do some consultancy work with them, but they're the real deal. And I think because they've got a big holistic view, they're going to make a bigger change than just single practitioners. They're helping people help themselves that don't have as bigger issues. So you're getting in before there's an issue,
Yeah, I love what they do. I'm a big fan. I think it's excellent. Every class client who I get encountered with, I'm a very big proponent of at least training bare feet. And if you can't train bare feet, then I think that there's definitely some kind of dysfunction happening in the body at somewhere that's preventing you to be able to do that. Because it's weird how you'll go to yoga, you'll go to Pilates, and they ask you to be bare feet. You'll swim and you're barefoot. You're at the beach and you're barefoot. But we've decided somehow along the line just to put shoes everywhere else.
Yeah, it is really weird. And that's right. If someone can't be in the gym training barefoot, it suggests that there's an issue. And that's when they might do that Explorer program, or they might see a podiatrist like me or someone from that program that can isolate what's going on, whether it's ankle range of motion or a texture issue, like they're struggling to cope with texture on the sole of their foot because they've been in shoes like their whole life. Then that can change as well. You just slowly adapt. It's just slowly adding some stimulus and then slowly building up more stimulus. Most issues can be, follow that principle of just slowly changing the stimulus.
Oh, Andy, there is one question that we ask all of the guests who come onto our podcast. And I'm really interested in your perspective because you're kind of in the fitness industry, but you're like outside the fitness industry. So if it was Rainbow Land and you had no consequences and you could change absolutely anything about the health and fitness industry, what would you change?
There'd be no such thing as a conventional shoe. Everyone would just be in barefoot because babies are in barefoot shoes until they're 3, and then they go into a conventional shoe to prepare them to be an adult in conventional shoes. So it just wouldn't be a thing. And I'd do myself out of a job because I think podiatrists would hardly have anything to do. Maybe no shoes, no chairs.
Very interesting. I like it.
That would be amazing for our musculoskeletal health. It would do a lot of people out with a job.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. Funnily enough, today I was literally Googling, the chairs that you can kind of kneel and swivel on. It's like a movement-based chair. I was Googling that for myself. I'm like, I feel like I need this.
I have a standing desk. I have texture under my feet when I'm on my standing desk. So I'm not just standing in one spot because that's not really a human thing to do either. So I'm changing what's going on. Sometimes I'm elevated, like rocking back, just getting deep texture into my feet in obviously minimalist shoes. So I have that set up. Or if I'm doing other work, I might put my laptop on a chair and just use the ground and move because the ground's uncomfortable. And so it's like you're doing a little mini yoga workout for your hips just because you're on the ground. So yeah, they're my little tips for, unchairing things.
I like it a lot. Excellent. My last question would be if you had any suggestions for someone who was interested in starting, where would you send them? Where would you want them to look?
I think we've touched on it. The Foot Collective is a great place to start. They could in Australia, we're lucky. We've got a store, especially here in Melbourne, called Soul Mechanics. It's a barefoot shoe store, which is really rare in the whole world. In fact, there was a barefoot shoe expo, the first of its type in the States about a month ago. And that was like, everyone's just blown away. Like, this is a thing. It's actually happening, Anyway, so you could just buy a pair of barefoot shoes and start wearing them to the cafe instead of putting your Converse on or something, and just dip your toe in and just see how it feels. And if it hurts, then you've gone too far and back it off a bit and just be sensible. Be your own experiment. I was my own experiment through this, and that's how I learned. And so that's a pretty powerful thing to do. Be open-minded as well, because some people will go, oh, I found the way. It's worked. And then 2 months later, they've shelved that idea because it didn't work for them anymore. And so I get a bit frustrated by that, but I see other people doing it. Like, they're new to it. They're full of enthusiasm. And then that's like, oh, it's got to be this way. And it's got to be this way. It's like, just chill out. It's different for everyone. Let's just find our own way.
I like that approach for sure. I am a notorious fence sitter. Excellent. Well, Andy, all of the links to find what Andy's about and everything that he's talked about will be in the show notes, so please check it out. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Vanessa.
We are so grateful for your support and for tuning in to our podcast. We know that many of you have friends or colleagues who would also benefit from our content, and we would be honored if you could share our podcast with them. Sharing on social media, email, or even talking about us to a colleague is such a huge help in getting our message out there. Can't wait to continue to grow and connect with more people through our podcast.